The two men in dark suits entered Elvis Presley's dressing room without knocking. It was 90 minutes before his opening night in Las Vegas. What they said next would turn his greatest triumph into his most dangerous trap. July 31st, 1969, Las Vegas International Hotel, 6:30 p.m. Elvis Presley stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of his white jumpsuit. The costume was revolutionary, nothing like the conservative suits he'd worn in the past. This was different, bold, dangerous, exactly what he needed for his comeback. It had been 8 years since his last live performance, 8 years of terrible movies, of watching his career slowly suffocate under Colonel Tom Parker's management. 8 years of seeing the Beatles and the Rolling Stones take over the world that should have been his. But tonight, all of that would change. The Las Vegas International Hotel's showroom seated 2,000 people. Every seat was sold out for the next month. Critics from every major publication were flying in. This wasn't just another show. This was Elvis Presley declaring to the world that the king wasn't dead. He was just getting started again. "Looking good, Elvis." Joe Esposito, his road manager and closest friend, stood by the door. "How you feeling?" "Nervous as hell," Elvis admitted, his southern drawl still thick despite years in Hollywood. "I ain't done this in a long time, Joe." "You're gonna kill it, trust me." Elvis wanted to believe him, but the fear was real. What if people didn't care anymore? What if they came Elvis didn't recognize either man, but the way Joe's hand moved instinctively toward his waist, where he sometimes carried a small pistol, told Elvis everything he needed to know. These men were dangerous. "I don't know who you are," Elvis said, keeping his voice steady, "but I've got a show in 90 minutes. Whatever you're selling, I ain't buying." The tall man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "We're not selling anything, Mr. Presley. We're here to discuss the terms of your arrangement." "What arrangement? I don't have any arrangement with you." "You do now." The shorter man spoke for the first time. His voice was rough, like gravel, New York accent. "See this hotel? The International? It's connected to certain interests that have invested a lot of money into making sure your comeback is successful." Elvis felt his stomach tighten. He looked at Joe, who looked equally confused and concerned. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Joe said carefully. "Elvis's contract is with the hotel management, and we are the hotel management. Well, the part that matters, anyway. My name is Anthony Giancana. My associates and I have significant financial interests in this establishment and in you, Mr. Presley." Giancana. Elvis had heard that name before. He couldn't remember where, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that made people nervous. "I didn't ask for your investment," Elvis said. "No, you didn't, but the good colonel did." The room suddenly felt colder. "What are you talking about?" Giancana moved to the small bar in the corner of the dressing room, poured him. Elvis's mind was racing. If what this man was saying was true, then his entire comeback, everything he'd been working toward for 8 years, was built on money from the mob. And mob money always came with strings attached. "What do you want?" Elvis asked quietly. "Smart question," Giancana smiled again. "We want what any investor wants, return on investment. You're going to perform here in Vegas, not just this month, but regularly, 6 weeks a year minimum. And you're going to pack this showroom every single night." "That's it?" That's the beginning. You're also going to make appearances at certain other establishments we're associated with, restaurants, clubs, places that could use the Elvis Presley seal of approval. Nothing illegal, nothing that will damage your reputation, just showing up, being seen. Elvis looked at Joe, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. This was a trap, a beautiful golden trap. "And if I say no?" The shorter man laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "You don't say no, Mr. Presley," Giancana said, his voice losing his smoothness. "Because if you do, some very interesting information of your pharmaceutical habits might find its way to the press, along with some photographs we've acquired from your time in Hollywood, photos that would be very difficult to explain to your wife, to your fans, to the world." Elvis felt his blood run cold. He'd been careful, so careful. But in Hollywood, in Vegas, there were always people watching, always cameras, always someone willing to sell information to the highest bidder. "You're blackmailing me." "We're ensuring our investment is protected," Giancana corrected. "Think of it as insurance. You do what we ask, everyone's happy. You become a star again. We make our money back. Your secrets stay secret. Win-win." "And if something happens to me, if I can't perform?" The shorter man stepped forward. "Then we talk to Mrs. Presley and to your daughter, make sure they understand their obligations." On the Behalian in display. In that moment, Elvis realized the truth. This wasn't just about money or performances. They owned him now, and they were willing to hurt the people he loved to keep control. But what they didn't know was that Elvis Presley had been in tough spots before, and he didn't break easily. "Get out," Elvis said, his voice low and dangerous. Giancana raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I said, get out. I got a show to do. I'll think about your proposal, but right now you're in my dressing room, and I want you gone." For a moment, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. The shorter man's hand moved inside his jacket. Joe tensed, ready to act. Then Giancana laughed. "I like you, Elvis. You got guts. That's good. That's what we need. A fighter, not some washed-up pretty boy crying about his career." He set down his drink and moved toward the door. "You go do your show. Knock 'em dead. We'll talk more after, when you've had time to consider your options." The two men left as suddenly as they'd arrived. Elvis stood perfectly still for a moment. Then his legs gave out. He sat heavily on the couch, his hands shaking. "Jesus Christ," Joe whispered. "Elvis, those were—" "I know who they were." "We gotta call someone. The police, the FBI. "And tell them what?" Elvis looked up at Joe. "That the mob financed my comeback? That'll kill my career faster than any blackmail. No one will touch me if they think I'm mob-connected." "So what do we do?" Elvis took a deep breath. His show started in 85 minutes. Thousands of people were out there, waiting, hoping, believing that Elvis Presley could still be the king. "We do the show, and then we figure out how to get out of this mess." 8 p.m., showroom. Elvis stood in the wings, listening to the orchestra warm up. The showroom was packed. He could hear the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Somewhere out there were the critics who would make or break his comeback. Somewhere out there were fans who'd loved him since the beginning, hoping he hadn't changed too much. Somewhere out there were the younger generation, curious to see if this relic from the 50s still had anything to offer. And somewhere out there, Elvis knew, were Giancana's men, watching, waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, the Las Vegas International Hotel is proud to— But as Elvis performed, he noticed something that would change everything. In the VIP section, sitting in the front row, was someone he'd never expected to see. Someone who could either save him or destroy him completely. Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board himself, sitting there with a drink in his hand and an unreadable expression on his face. Frank, who had his own complicated history with Vegas. Frank, who knew exactly what kind of men ran this town. Frank, who might be the only person in the world who could help Elvis out of this mess, or who might be working with him. Elvis finished the song to thunderous applause. He grabbed the mic. Thank you very much," his signature phrase. The crowd loved it. It's good to be back, real good. He went into That's All Right, one of his first hits, then Heartbreak Hotel, then Hound Dog, song after song, each one better than the last. The critics would later call it one of the greatest performances in Vegas history. Rolling Stone would write, Elvis has left the building of mediocrity and returned to his throne. But Elvis barely heard the applause. His mind was split between the performance and the problem, between being the king on stage and being trapped backstage. During a costume change, Joe rushed up to him. Frank wants to see you, after the show, in his dressing room. Frank's got a dressing room here? He's performing down the hall at the Sands, but he came over just to watch you. Elvis nodded. Tell him I'll be there. The second half of the show was even better than the first. Elvis closed with Can't Help Falling in Love, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. When he took his final bow, the standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. He'd done it. The comeback was real. But as Elvis walked off stage, sweating and exhausted and exhilarated, he saw Giancana standing in the wings, clapping slowly, deliberately. Wonderful show, Mr. Presley. Absolutely wonderful. See you tomorrow. We have much to discuss. 11:30 p.m., Sands Hotel, Frank's dressing room. Frank Sinatra was alone when Elvis arrived, still in his white jumpsuit, a robe thrown over it. The chairman was drinking bourbon, looking at a wall covered in photos. Frank with presidents, Frank with movie stars, Frank with people who ran the world. Kid. Elvis sat down heavily. If Frank was admitting this, then the situation was even worse than he thought. But what Frank said next would offer Elvis a dangerous path out, if he was brave enough to take it. They approached me in '51, Frank continued. Different people, same organization, said they could help my career, make sure I got the right movie roles, the right club bookings. All I had to do was cooperate. And did you? Frank looked at Elvis for a long moment. For a while, yeah, I did, because I was desperate. My career was in the toilet. Ava had left me. I was broke, and they offered me a way back, so I took it. How'd you get out? Who says I got out? Frank smiled bitterly. Kid, you don't get out, not really, but you can renegotiate. You can find a way to live with it that doesn't destroy you. How? Frank set down his drink and leaned forward. You gotta understand something about these people. They're businessmen, violent businessmen, sure, but businessmen first. They want money, they want influence, but what they really want is respect. They want to be seen as legitimate. I don't understand. They're using you, Elvis, but you can use them right back. Give them what they want, the performances, the appearances, the association with your name, but make sure you get something in return. Control over your music, better contract terms with the colonel, protection from other problems. You're saying I should work with them? I'm saying you should be smart about it. You can't fight them, they'll destroy you. You can't run, they'll find you. So you dance with them, carefully, and you build yourself up so strong, become so valuable, that eventually they need you more than you need them. Elvis thought about it. It made sense in a sick way, but there was one problem. What about my family? They threatened Priscilla, Lisa Marie. Frank's expression hardened. That's where you draw the line. You make it clear, crystal clear, that family is off limits. You tell Tony that if anything happens to your wife or daughter, you'll walk away from every... Elvis looked at Frank Sinatra, this legend who'd survived mob connections, scandal, career disasters, and come out the other side still standing. And he made a decision that would define the rest of his life in Vegas. "Tell me exactly what to say." Frank smiled. "Now you're thinking." August 1st, 1969, Las Vegas International Hotel, Penthouse Suite, 2 p.m. Elvis walked into the meeting alone. Joe had wanted to come, but Elvis said no. This was something he had to do himself. Giancana was there, along with the shorter man, whose name, Elvis had learned, was Sal Maroney, and 3 others, all in expensive suits, all with that same predatory look. "Mr. Presley," Giancana said, "sit down. We have terms to discuss." "No," Elvis said. Giancana raised an eyebrow. "No?" "I'll stand, and I'll talk. You listen." Elvis kept his voice calm but firm, channeling every ounce of stage presence he'd developed over 15 years. "Here's how this is gonna work. I'll perform at this hotel 6 weeks a year, like you said. I'll make appearances at places you want me seen. I'll even take photos with your friends, smile for their cameras, make them feel big shots." "That's what I'm not finished." Elvis cut him off. The men in the room shifted uncomfortably. No one talked to Tony Giancana like that. "Second, my family is completely off limits. You don't talk to them, you don't talk about them, you don't even look at them funny. They're untouchable. Because here's what you need to understand, Mr. Giancana. I'm worth more to you alive and performing than I am destroyed. But if anything happens to Priscilla or Lisa Marie, I'll burn this whole thing down. I'll go to the FBI. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them everything. And yeah, it'll destroy my career, but it'll destroy yours too. And I'm just one guy. You're an organization. You got more to lose than I do." The room was silent. Sal's hand moved inside his jacket. Elvis didn't flinch. He'd learned from watching Frank. Show no fear. These men respected power. Giancana stared at Elvis for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, he started to laugh. A real laugh, not the cold one from yesterday. And what he said next would seal the deal that would define Elvis's Vegas years. "You got balls, Presley. I'll give you that." Giancana stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Vegas Strip. "You know what I like about you? You're not pretending to be something you're not. You're not trying to act like you're clean, like you're above all this. You're just trying to protect what's yours." "That's all any of us are doing," Elvis said. "True, very true." Giancana turned back around. All right, here's what we're gonna do. You perform like you did last night, every night. You make this hotel the hottest spot in Vegas. In exchange, we'll help you with your Colonel problem. I know some people at RCA. We'll make sure you get better terms on your recording contract, too. And my family? Untouchable. I have your word. A man's family should be sacred. We're not animals. Giancana extended his hand. Do we have a deal, Mr. Presley? Elvis looked at the hand. Once he shook it, there was no going back. He'd be tied to these people forever. But if he didn't shake it, the alternative was worse. He thought about Priscilla, about Lisa Marie, about the career he'd worked so hard to rebuild, about the music he still wanted to make. He shook Giancana's hand. We have a deal. August 1, 1969, 8 p.m., backstage. Elvis stood in the wings before his second show, and he felt different, lighter somehow, despite the weight of the deal he'd just made. Because at least now he knew where he stood. He'd drawn his lines. He'd protected his family. He'd negotiated from a position of strength. Frank Sinatra had been right. You couldn't fight these people, but you could dance with them on your own terms. Joe came up beside him. You okay? Yeah, I think so. What happened in that meeting? I became a Vegas performer. Elvis smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Really became one. The announcer introduced him, and Elvis walked onto that stage for the second night of what would become a legendary Vegas residency. Over the next 7 years, he would perform in Vegas hundreds of times. He would become synonymous with the city. The white jumpsuit, the karate moves, the over-the-top showmanship, it all started here. But every single show, Elvis would think about that meeting, about the price he'd paid for his comeback. But Elvis called it something else. He called it survival. Because what no one watching from the audience ever knew was the truth hidden behind those stage lights and jumpsuit sequins. Elvis Presley wasn't just performing in Vegas. He was performing for Vegas. And the price of that performance was a piece of his soul he'd never get back. Epilogue, 1977. When Elvis died 8 years later, certain people attended his funeral who seemed out of place. Men in expensive dark suits who didn't cry, didn't speak to the family, just stood in the back and paid their respects. Priscilla noticed them. So did Vernon, Elvis's father, but no one said anything. After the funeral, one of these men placed an envelope on Elvis's grave. Inside was a single sentence written in elegant script. The king kept his word, so did we. It was signed just with an initial, G. The envelope was removed by security before the press saw it, and its contents were never made public. The relationship between Elvis Presley and certain elements of Las Vegas society remained buried, a secret taken to graves on both sides. But those who knew, those who were there in 1969, understood the truth. Elvis's Vegas comeback wasn't just about music. It wasn't just about reclaiming his throne. It was about making a deal with the devil and somehow coming out alive. He performed brilliantly. He protected his family. He became a legend. And he paid for it every single day for the rest of his life. The white jumpsuit wasn't just a costume. It was armor. The over-the-top performances weren't just showmanship, they were distraction. The pills, the isolation, the slow decline that everyone saw but couldn't stop, it all traced back to that night in July 1969 when two men in dark suits walked into Elvis's dressing room and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. They said it was a betrayal. Elvis called it survival. History calls it legend. But the truth died in that Las Vegas penthouse meeting, and only the ghosts of the desert know what really happened when the king made his deal with the devil and somehow, impossibly, lived to sing about it.